So, Jeremy, welcome to CloudTrade TV podcasts, as I affectionately call it. This is, I think, number 8 in the series that I've been running so far, where I'm talking to colleagues within CloudTrade about their experience and about certain salient topics to do with our industry, topics that we hear about from our customers about how we can help them with various challenges with processing inbound business documents. So the context of today is we've chosen a subject, finance transformation. So delighted to welcome you this call. And I've just noticed that we're both sitting in the same virtual room. So good choice there. And what I think would be a good starting point, Jeremy, is for the listeners to understand a bit about Jeremy Phillips. What's your background? What gives you the experience, the ability to talk about finance transformation? So if you could just help us and put that into context, that would be wonderful.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad I made the top 10 as well. That's good. So my background is that I've spent just over 20 years in and around ERP systems, purchase to pay systems, and I've had an opportunity to work with a large number of different systems, different sectors, different business types. But I think the key thing has been all of the projects that I've been involved in from a delivery aspect and a requirements gathering stage have all been around delivering transformation, either at an organisational level, whether a benefit might cover the entire organisation or departments or teams, and sometimes they'll focus in on specific processes as well. But it's always been about the end-to-end. It's always been involved at the initial stage of the exploring the gathering requirements all the way through to the delivery stage.
Just put that into a bit of context, Jeremy. When you say finance transformation, it's a big subject, and in my mind, and I've talked a lot in the previous podcasts about capturing data off inbound documents. And I suppose that's the bedrock, isn't it? It's the foundation for finance transformation from the point of view, if I'm receiving supplier invoice that I need to pay, if I'm receiving a customer order in that I need to transact and deliver the goods or the services, and all of that in a timely manner. But taking that into the broader context then, so perhaps stepping away from pure data capture, we've got the information now in our systems. What can we do with it then to enhance finance transformation?
So it's an interesting question. As you say, it's a broad topic. As soon as you start talking about transformation, but I think the key thing, transformation isn't new. This isn't something that's just emerging now, and I don't think it should ever be seen as an end goal either. We're always looking for continuous ways to improve. Within every organisation, within every department, there's always this desire to streamline a function or to lower a cost or offer greater insights into data, enable collaboration. Whatever the outcome is, it shouldn't be seen as the end goal. And the other thing, there's a bit of a cliche that goes with it, but all transformation requires change, but not all change is transformational. And I think it's quite important to actually focus in on what the objectives are, what the bigger picture is, and in the context of finance transformation, a lot of people will think about overhauling an entire system. So, replacing an ERP to deliver transformation.
Right.
But actually, if you think about the sort of changes that are made at that more organizational level, where many different departments are impacted, you don't always see benefits within maybe each department in each area. So there might be operational change that actually needs to happen to enable the broader transformation or digitization to actually have even greater benefits. And if you think about the strategic requirements, those will often be met by finance transformation, but operationally, that's sometimes a bit of a blocker. And I think that's where, in the context of CloudTrade, that we come in. So CloudTrade, as you know, is all about streamlining to drive reduction in manual processing, reduce processing time, but also without having to alter and impact the sending organization's ability to transact and digitally with a particular buyer. Or the other way around. So a lot of the time it can be, automating volumes of documents very quickly, usually within a few minutes, but again with 100% accuracy to make sure that the data that's coming in, the capture, if you like, or the data extraction, meets all of the requirements of the receiving party, to make sure that all of the validations are done, to make sure that the data that we're extracting actually drives downstream processing as much as it does point of capture. Now, when you start to capture accurate information, accurate data, that starts to drive real change behind the scenes, because people do get more insight into data. People are able to understand a little bit more about where this might go. So when you start to think about, contracts that are in place, dynamic discounting, prompt payments, etc., all of these KPIs and factors rely on accurate data, but also being managed very quickly and very efficiently. And I think that's where the CloudTrade element comes into finance transformation.
Absolutely, really interesting subjects and topics that you just highlighted. A couple of things I'd just like to focus on. I'm always very, very keen whenever I've engaged with an organisation is to have a clear understanding of the required business outcomes and something that we can measure. So, where are we today, and where do we want to try and get to, and in the journey, whatever that transformation may be, you can measure it and do your checks and balances, because without that, how do you know that you've actually delivered against your business objectives? And the other thing that you touched on there was around dynamic discounting, and supply chain financing that works hand in glove with dynamic discounting. I remember many years ago presenting to a group in Dublin, talking about settlement discounts. Must have been probably 15 years ago, and it was um, to the audience anyway, and it was quite a large sector of different businesses within the Republic of Ireland. Um, Taking an early settlement discount was something that was alien to them. They hadn't really understood it. And back into the context of this finance transformation, if I receive an invoice and I process it on the day of receipt, so it's sitting in my system and I can pay, if that supplier offers I'll give you 2% for 10 days, or in some cases, in my old industry many years ago, I was in the building sector, and I was getting up to 10% discount for making payment early. So if I got the cash available, that was straight to my bottom line. It was a significant benefit. And most organizations, if you ask the question, if I pay you early, can I have a discount? In most cases, it's going to be yes. But having that ability, having that transformation program that says, I'm going to receive, I'm going to extract, I'm going to put this data in my back end system so I can take advantage of dynamic discounting, is critical.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.
And part of that, just interested in your thoughts around, something I'm really keen on is um, managing the health of your supply chain. If I'm manufacturing something, be that a food product or engineering or whatever, without my raw materials, I've got a problem, and I have to therefore look after my supply chain to ensure that I've got that effective delivery of goods and services. So that if I work collaboratively with them and talk about their cash flow as well as my own cash flow, that collaborative approach through the finance transformation model you've just talked about is so important.
I couldn't agree more, and I think more so now than ever before as well. Because if we think about the availability of some of the goods, lead times can be changing. Delivery times are changing. Transportation costs are moving around. So you're absolutely right. I think it is more critical now to have a healthy supply chain and a healthy relationship on both sides than ever before. And it's funny you should talk about some of the topics that you just touched on there. So again, as you know, CloudTrade's vision is creating a world of frictionless digital trade, and
Absolutely.
and that goes both ways. So as a receiver of a purchase order, if I'm buying an item, and I can send out an order digitally, and I know that it can be received digitally, processed quickly without any intervention, completely accurately as well. Those goods can be picked and packed much faster than they would have done if there had been manual processing involved there as well.
Absolutely.
And on the flip side of that, the invoice coming back in, again, it makes sense if the supplier can send a digital invoice, but without having to change any of their processes or fees, introduce extra fees, and for the buyer to be able to process that invoice quickly. If all of that process can happen, potentially within 24 hours of the order going out, the invoice is back, the goods are en route, or even received, then you've got opportunity there for some of that dynamic discounting that you're talking about. And the percentages that you can gain are quite significant sometimes. There might be a small percentage, but if you look at it as the volume of
Absolutely, yeah.
trade, it can be significant. So I think it is important to recognise that it's not going to be an overnight success if you look at some of the more traditional methods of dealing digitally with your supply chain. But actually, what we're trying to enable within CloudTrade is making documents and the data within it more accessible and more useful for the entire business, and that's both sides. So it is about driving that change, moving forward all the time.
Absolutely right. And I think just looking at the time, we'll conclude in a moment. And I'll just ask you to think about what are the 5 big topics that you would recommend to an organisation that we're considering finance transformation. So I'll give you a moment to think about that. But just in respect of document processing, as you've just discussed with regard to inbound orders or inbound invoices, it's about having the ability to extract data off that document and process it so that when it's received, the recipient can trust the quality of that data to enable them to manage effectively automatically with no human touch the transaction. And you're right, that's exactly CloudTrade's operating model, and it has been from day one because of our unique approach. So back to my final topic. What are those 5 things, or if you can't think of 5, top 3 items that you would recommend that an organisation focuses on to start that journey of finance transformation?
There's probably an awful lot, so I'll try and keep them short and relevant. But I think if you're looking at finance transformation, define the scope of the project. Don't try and achieve too much necessarily in part
Good
one,
point.
because otherwise you'll find that some of the other components start to break down. I think the other part is to get the buy-in of all of the operational departments as well. We're in a world where everybody's talking about moving workloads to the cloud. They're talking about SaaS, but quite often there will, as I say, be certain functions that are left behind, and that can really impact the overall success. So define that scope, get people involved, and then start to look at the data, the detail first of all as well. So don't necessarily try to enable 100% of your supply chain overnight. Maybe target the top 80%, top 90%, as these are the ones that there's benefit for all. There's benefits for both sides, and they'll start moving towards that goal there.
Yeah.
And I think the engagement from organisations such as ourselves, as you know, we enter into consultations with organisations to see if there is a fit. And I think don't be afraid to reach out in the current world, to ask advice, to ask opinions, to seek guidance from your peers in other organisations as well, because there will be people that have gone through these type of journeys before, and I think there's more information now about the success of those as well. But the other thing, actually, sorry, a 4th one or 5th one, I'm not sure which this is, but it's to engage with that supply chain as well. So it's get your suppliers on board, or if you're starting to introduce a campaign where you're looking to ingest digital orders, reach out to your clients and understand if they're receptive to working with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, thank you, Jeremy. That's really good advice. And just to finalise from me, it's make it easy for the sending party to transmit their documents, which is what we're all about. And it's about having a measurement, understanding where you are today and where you want to get to, and making sure that you deliver against that required business outcome at the end of the project. Jeremy, it's been a pleasure as always talking to you this morning. Thank you for your time. Look forward to joining you on future podcasts.
Likewise. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Have a great rest of the day.